Should Betty and Larry move? Yes or no? Because in 2026, a move isn't just about new walls or a different mailbox. It's about who gets access, who gets influence, who becomes the voice speaking on their behalf, and who quietly gains proximity close enough to turn vulnerability into leverage. Right now, there is no verified public confirmation that Betty and Larry Whittaker are relocating. That matters. Facts first. But the conversation itself isn't random. It's rising in the shadow of widely reported legal action connected to alleged exploitation surrounding the family. When conditions change legally, physically, or socially, relocation stops being cosmetic. It becomes structural, and structural change creates chain reactions. This isn't about gossip. It's about consequence. If they move, 7 things shift immediately. Some of those shifts are hopeful, some are dangerous, and one of them, the one people ignore, decides whether a new chapter becomes protection or simply a more sophisticated form of control. Reason 1. Silence can become safety. For years, Betty and Larry's address functioned less like a home and more like a landmark. Visitors, filming, unplanned drop-ins, outsiders treating a private residence like a public exhibit. In 2026, privacy for them isn't luxury. It's a security layer. Exposure creates opportunity. Opportunity creates access. And access, in the wrong hands, creates risk. A relocation could reduce spontaneous visits. It could lower filming pressure. It could remove the easy familiarity that allows people to show up unannounced under the banner of help. Most people imagine protection as something loud. More updates, more watchers, more online guardians. But real protection sometimes looks like quiet, predictable routines. No surprise knocks at the door. Silence can stabilize nervous systems. Silence can slow chaos. Silence can give aging adults space to exist without performance. But silence has a shadow. Reduced visibility can also hide deterioration. If attention drops and structured support doesn't replace it, isolation can make neglect slower to detect and harder to correct. So silence alone isn't protection. Structure is. Scheduled welfare check-ins, multiple responsible contacts, clear documentation of who monitors what. If a move happens without layered oversight, the quiet that feels safe can quietly become dangerous. That's the first shift. Reason 2. A move disrupts control patterns. Control doesn't always look cruel. Sometimes it looks helpful. I'll handle it. I'll coordinate everything. I'm the point person. When one person becomes the primary access point to vulnerable adults, that person becomes the gate. And gates decide who enters and who doesn't. Relocation can instantly disrupt established control loops. Familiar access routes disappear. The old system of drop-in influence vanishes overnight. Narratives built around proximity collapse. But disruption cuts both ways. Breaking one gate can create another. If everyone else backs away and allows one individual to manage all communication in a new setting, relocation doesn't eliminate control. It simply transfers it. Protection requires distributed oversight, multiple verified contacts, clear boundaries that prevent a single voice from becoming the only interpreter of needs. When environments change, power reorganizes. That's the second shift. Reason 3. Housing condition becomes leverage. A safer, more stable home isn't just about comfort. It changes how services interact. Functional utilities, clean food storage, fewer environmental hazards, layouts that allow caregiving without obstruction. These aren't aesthetic upgrades. They are structural stability. In 2026, stability translates into measurable outcomes. Fewer emergency calls, more consistent routines, easier coordination with legitimate providers. Environment influences intervention, but stability can also attract opportunists. Sudden offers to renovate, offers to manage donations, individuals volunteering to oversee funds or decisions. Help can arrive, carrying invisible strings. Transparency protects. Receipts protect. Clear separation between donors and decision-makers protects. If housing improves, that improvement must not become a bargaining chip, because a home can become proof of care or proof of control. Reason 4. Legal clarity shifts with relocation. Who is listed as a responsible contact? Who authorizes care? Who communicates with providers? Who gets called during emergencies? These questions sound administrative. They are not. Authority gaps are exploitable gaps. If documentation is unclear, individuals can present themselves as official representatives without formal backing. Confusion creates openings. Relocation can clarify authority or scramble it. Paperwork determines outcomes in crisis. Clear documentation of roles. Third-party oversight. Written boundaries. These aren't bureaucratic inconveniences. They are protection mechanisms. When address changes, paperwork must follow. Without that alignment, vulnerability increases. Reason 5. Service access changes with geography. Distance decides outcomes. Proximity to clinics. Reliable medication access. Predictable home health visits. Faster emergency response times. Consistent grocery access. Stable heating infrastructure. Geography shapes survival. If relocation places Betty and Larry closer to structured services, small problems can be resolved before they escalate. If relocation increases isolation, the opposite occurs. Even a well-intended move can create a dangerous gap during transition. Disrupted routines, missed medication, delayed check-ins, stress spikes. Continuity planning determines safety. Essentials must be in place on day one. Verified care handoffs. Confirmed contacts. No reliance on assumption. Reason 6. Public reaction can create a second wave. The moment relocation rumors circulate, the internet reacts. Speculation. Impersonation accounts. Fundraisers claiming insider access. Exclusive updates. Trusted sources. Confusion creates markets. Predators don't need physical proximity. They exploit narrative gaps. If a move happens without controlled communication, misinformation spreads faster than clarification. Verified channels matter. Clear statements matter. A strict boundary against revealing location matters. Protection requires resisting the urge to prove relocation with details. A sanctuary revealed becomes a target. Reason 7. The one most people ignore. Relocation creates a vacuum, and vacuums get filled. When old systems dissolve, new systems form. Whoever speaks loudest during uncertainty can become the new gatekeeper. Whoever organizes donations can become the new financial funnel. Whoever controls updates can become the narrative owner. Exploitation doesn't require breaking doors. It requires controlling access. The house itself isn't the threat. The transition is. If privacy isn't protected, relocation becomes a beacon. If oversight isn't layered, control consolidates under a new name. If donation channels aren't structured, financial chaos reappears in different packaging. A move can absolutely increase safety, but only if it is paired with multiple verified oversight contacts, clear authority documentation, privacy-first communication, no single gatekeeper, structured service continuity, transparent donation protocols. Without those, relocation changes geography, but not vulnerability. So here is the real question. Not just should they move, but if they do, who builds the structure around that move? Because the moment relocation happens, a chain reaction begins. Access shifts, power shifts, narratives shift, opportunities shift, and protection either strengthens or fragments. What matters most in 2026? Privacy? Oversight? Services? Comment one word and explain why. The next chapter isn't about an address. It's about who controls what happens after it changes. If Betty and Larry relocate, the physical move will be the smallest change. The real shift will be social, because relocation doesn't just move furniture. It reorganizes relationships. Reason 8. Access becomes currency. When a family like the Whittakers becomes known publicly, proximity gains value. Not emotional value, transactional value. Access can mean content. Access can mean credibility. Access can mean influence. Access can mean donations. In 2026, anyone who can legitimately say, "I'm in contact with them," immediately gains leverage in online spaces. If Betty and Larry move, access becomes scarce. Scarcity increases value, and when something increases in value, people compete for it. Competition can create two outcomes. One, it can push helpers to formalize boundaries, clear verification, structured visitation rules, transparent communication channels. Or two, it can push individuals to exaggerate proximity, claim inside knowledge, imply control where none exists. That's where the first danger forms after relocation. If the move creates uncertainty, the loudest voice may become the assumed authority. Protection requires preempting that vacuum. Before relocation happens, if it ever does, there must be a clear answer to one question: who is officially authorized to speak about them, and who is not? Without that clarity, narrative opportunism begins immediately. Reason 9. Financial narratives reset. Every time the Whittakers' situation shifts, a familiar pattern follows. Money conversations. When they were first widely filmed, donations surged. When legal concerns emerged, financial allegations surfaced. If a move happens, the same cycle can restart. Who paid for it? Who's managing it? Is there a fund? Can I donate? Even when no fundraiser exists, people may create them. Impersonation accounts, unauthorized campaigns, emotional appeals framed around relocation. The internet has shown repeatedly that urgency drives giving, and relocation creates urgency. Protection requires financial containment. If funds are ever needed, there must be one verified channel, clear reporting, no private handling of public donations, documented oversight. Otherwise, exploitation mutates. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Even well-intentioned people can mishandle money when structure doesn't exist. Transparency isn't an insult. It's insulation. Reason 10. Emotional dependency can intensify. When public attention drops after a relocation, a smaller circle often forms around vulnerable individuals. That smaller circle can provide stability, or it can create emotional dependency. Dependency shifts power subtly. If Betty and Larry rely on one person for communication, transportation, scheduling, and access to the outside world, that person becomes indispensable. Indispensable people are rarely questioned, and unexamined power is the most durable form of control. The protection mechanism here is redundancy, multiple trusted contacts, multiple observers, shared responsibility. No single person should become the only bridge between them and the outside world. Reason 11. Relocation changes perception of legitimacy. Right now, their home, familiar and heavily documented, carries history. If they move into a safer, cleaner environment, public perception shifts. Improved housing often signals improvement overall. That perception can work in their favor. Legitimate services may engage more easily. Public concern may soften. Emergency narratives may calm. But perception can also create complacency. If outsiders assume they're fine now, oversight can loosen. Less scrutiny, fewer check-ins, reduced urgency. Stability must not eliminate vigilance, because vulnerability doesn't disappear with fresh paint. Reason 12. Aging amplifies the stakes. In 2026, age matters. Transitions are harder. Routines are fragile. Stress impacts health more quickly. Relocation can trigger confusion, sleep disruption, medication mismanagement, increased anxiety. The emotional shock of environment change must be planned for. Protection requires gradual transition where possible. Familiar items, familiar schedules, clear orientation support. A safe house is not safe if the transition destabilizes the people inside it. Reason 13. Legal scrutiny doesn't end with relocation. Even if alleged exploitation issues are addressed, oversight can continue. Relocation can attract renewed attention from agencies verifying conditions. That's not punitive, that's protective. But legal scrutiny can also be misrepresented online as scandal. Routine welfare checks can be framed as investigation. Administrative adjustments can be framed as crisis. Control over narrative again becomes critical. If official processes are happening, they must be explained clearly and calmly through verified sources, not through speculation channels. Reason 14. The internet never forgets. Even if Betty and Larry move, their digital footprint remains. Old footage, old addresses, old controversies. Relocation doesn't erase visibility. If the new location is ever leaked, the old pattern of physical visitation can reemerge. Strict privacy boundaries must be maintained. No landmarks, no background reveals, no casual hints. Protection means resisting curiosity, even from supporters. And here is the deeper chain reaction few people anticipate. Relocation changes the emotional story arc. For years, their narrative has been tied to place. The end of the roadhouse, the isolation, the vulnerability tied to geography. If they move, that symbolic anchor disappears. Some viewers will celebrate. Others will question authenticity. Some will lose interest. Attention will reorganize. When attention reorganizes, financial flow reorganizes. When financial flow reorganizes, influence reorganizes. When influence reorganizes, control reorganizes. Every structural change triggers social change. This is why relocation cannot be treated as a feel-good conclusion. It is a reset point, and resets are unstable periods. If managed properly, instability resolves into structure. If unmanaged, instability invites opportunism. So the real protection question isn't, should they move? It's, if they move, is there a plan for the 90 days after? Who monitors transitions? Who confirms services? Who documents finances? Who ensures no single gatekeeper forms? Who communicates verified updates? Who resists monetizing the transition? Because the first 90 days after relocation determine whether the move becomes stabilization or another chapter of exploitation under new branding. The hidden chain reaction is this. Relocation compresses risk into a short window. In that window, access, money, narrative, and authority all attempt to reorganize. If oversight is layered, the system stabilizes. If oversight is thin, new vulnerabilities form faster than old ones disappear. So, before anyone answers yes or no to relocation, the better question is the infrastructure ready? Because a house is not protection. Structure is. What do you think matters more in the first 90 days after a move? Continuity? Financial transparency? Authority clarity? Comment one word and explain your reasoning. The address may change. The stakes do not. If Betty and Larry move, the public will see the door close. What most people won't see is the power shift that happens quietly behind it. Because relocation isn't just about distance. It's about who adapts fastest to the new structure. Reason 15. The helper hierarchy resets. Every long-running situation builds an informal hierarchy. Who speaks first? Who is consulted? Who gets updates? Who is trusted? Who is tolerated? A move interrupts that hierarchy. The person who had influence because of proximity may lose it overnight, and someone else, perhaps quieter, perhaps more organized, may step forward. That can be healthy, but it can also trigger conflict. When influence changes, resentment often follows, and resentment online rarely stays quiet. If relocation happens, expect disputes over credit. I arranged it. I funded it. I made it possible. I was the one advocating. Those battles aren't about housing. They're about narrative ownership. Protection requires resisting ownership language entirely. No one owns their story. No one controls their chapter. If relocation becomes a trophy, exploitation returns under a softer label. Reason 16. Privacy can destabilize audiences. For years, many viewers have followed updates closely. They've formed emotional attachments. They feel invested. If relocation reduces visible updates, some supporters may feel shut out. That feeling can morph into suspicion. What are they hiding? Why aren't we seeing more? Who's controlling access? This reaction doesn't come from cruelty. It often comes from emotional investment colliding with new boundaries. But boundaries must hold, because emotional entitlement, even when it sounds supportive, can pressure vulnerable people into overexposure. Relocation must prioritize dignity over audience satisfaction. If fewer updates mean greater safety, fewer updates are justified. Reason 17. Oversight fatigue is real. At first, a move might trigger increased oversight. Check-ins, support visits, structured care. But over time, oversight can fatigue. When immediate crisis fades, urgency fades with it, and slow erosion begins. Appointments missed, small maintenance ignored, minor health issues delayed, none of it dramatic, all of it cumulative. Protection requires sustainability. Oversight must be designed for longevity, not emergency intensity. If relocation is treated as a fix instead of a phase, vigilance weakens. Reason 18. Social isolation can deepen unintentionally. Relocation may reduce unwanted visitors. That's protective, but it can also reduce familiar contact. Even flawed routines provide psychological anchors. If those anchors disappear without replacement, loneliness increases. Loneliness doesn't show up in public reports. It shows up in behavior shifts, withdrawal, irritability, declining motivation. A safe home must still be a connected home. Community access, structured social contact, consistent engagement. Protection is not isolation. It's controlled connection. Reason 19. Legal narratives may evolve. If relocation occurs after periods of alleged exploitation concerns, legal interpretations may shift. Past events may be re-examined. Responsibilities reassessed. Authority clarified more strictly. That can be stabilizing. But legal changes can also be misinterpreted publicly. Routine documentation can be framed as investigation. Administrative clarifications can be framed as scandal. Clear communication from verified sources remains essential. Not emotional commentary, not speculative posts. Documents, confirmed statements, measured language. Reason 20. Generational trauma doesn't move with the furniture. Even if Betty and Larry relocate to a safer structure, history remains. Poverty, isolation, family fracture, public exposure. Environmental change can improve daily life. It does not erase psychological imprint. Support must include emotional stabilization, consistent reassurance, predictable routines, clear expectations. Otherwise, old patterns can reappear in new rooms. Reason 21. The economic perception gap widens. If the new living arrangement appears visibly improved, public perception may overcorrect. They're taken care of now. They don't need support. They're stable. Perception of stability can reduce legitimate assistance, even when needs remain ongoing. This gap between appearance and reality is subtle. Protection requires balanced messaging, not crisis framing, not perfection framing, accurate framing. Stable does not mean self-sufficient. Safer does not mean free from vulnerability. Reason 22. Secondary exploitation may target the transition itself. Relocation periods create informational fog, and fog attracts opportunists. Fake insiders may claim, "They asked me to help. They need emergency relocation funds. I'm coordinating directly." Even if untrue, people donate based on urgency. Relocation creates urgency. This risk can only be reduced through proactive communication. If there is no official fundraiser, that must be stated clearly. If support is managed privately, that must be clarified. Silence without structure invites impersonation. Reason 23. Health monitoring changes with environment. If relocation improves heating, sanitation, and food access, health indicators may improve. Fewer respiratory irritants, better sleep, more stable medication routines. But relocation can also reveal previously masked health issues. New providers may identify concerns previously unnoticed. Increased documentation can create the illusion of new problems, when in reality, problems are simply being recorded. Interpretation matters. Visibility of care is not evidence of decline. Reason 24. Authority clarity becomes permanent or fragile. In the first weeks after relocation, roles must be defined. Who signs documents? Who approves visitors? Who coordinates care? Who communicates publicly? If those answers are consistent, structure strengthens. If they fluctuate, confusion becomes normalized. Confusion creates loopholes, and loopholes invite manipulation. Reason 25. The long-term narrative can finally shift or fracture further. If relocation is structured well, the Whittakers' story may slowly shift from spectacle to stability, less emergency, more routine, less reaction, more recovery. But if relocation becomes content, monetized update cycles, or competitive storytelling, fracture deepens. The core truth remains: a move does not solve vulnerability, it redistributes it. The question is whether redistribution strengthens protection or creates new pressure points. And here is the chain reaction few anticipate. Relocation changes the power map. Access becomes strategic. Information becomes filtered. Financial narratives reorganize. Oversight either multiplies or narrows. The environment shifts. The social architecture shifts with it. If multiple safeguards are layered, oversight, financial transparency, privacy enforcement, shared authority, relocation can mark the beginning of stability. If any layer fails, exploitation adapts. Because exploitation doesn't require broken walls, it requires broken structure. So the question isn't whether Betty and Larry deserve safer housing. It's whether the system around them is ready for the social consequences that follow it. What matters more after relocation? Redundancy of oversight, transparency of finances, clarity of authority, sustained community engagement. Comment one word, because the answer determines whether a move becomes protection or simply a new setting for the same risks. If Betty and Larry relocate, the most important changes won't be visible on camera. They will happen in paperwork, in routine, and in who quietly steps back. Reason 26. Distance changes influence faster than arguments ever could. For years, proximity has meant power. Whoever could physically show up first often shaped the narrative. Relocation disrupts that. When geography changes, influence must travel through structure instead of convenience. That alone can reduce impulsive involvement, but it also creates tension. People who once had access may suddenly feel displaced. That displacement can turn into online retaliation, not because the move was wrong, but because access is addictive. Protection requires accepting that fewer voices in the room often means greater safety, even if it frustrates observers. Reason 27. Stability is built on boring systems, not dramatic rescues, not viral generosity. Boring systems, scheduled wellness checks, documented care coordination, clear visitor policies, financial boundaries that cannot be bypassed. If relocation happens, the success of that move will depend entirely on whether those systems are installed immediately. Without them, a safer building becomes just a prettier backdrop. Reason 28. Transparency must be structured, not reactive. If updates are shared, they must be minimal and verified, not emotional, not defensive, not detailed. High-level confirmation. Nothing that reveals location. Nothing that invites curiosity seekers. Because in 2026, location spreads faster than protection. Reason 29. The first 90 days decide everything. Transitions create vulnerability. Sleep patterns shift. Medical schedules reset. Trust must rebuild in a new environment. If oversight intensifies during that window, long-term stability strengthens. If oversight relaxes because the move fixed it, small gaps expand. Protection is most fragile during improvement. Reason 30. A move doesn't eliminate the spotlight. It changes its angle. People will ask, where are they? Who arranged it? Who's in charge now? Those questions don't go away. They just migrate. The only defense is clarity without exposure. Because the real victory of relocation isn't secrecy. It's controlled access. So now the chain reaction is fully visible. Move. Authority resets. Access shifts. Narrative restructures. Oversight either multiplies or collapses. If privacy holds, stability has a chance. If control concentrates, exploitation rebrands. A move is not a solution. It is a fork in the road. Which path it becomes depends entirely on what surrounds it. Privacy? Oversight? Services? Shared authority? Comment one word, because the answer determines whether relocation becomes protection or simply a new chapter in the same story. A move is never just about walls. It's about power. It's about who holds the keys, not only to a door, but to information, to access, to decision-making. And in 2026, that distinction matters more than ever. Because Betty and Larry are not just two elderly people looking for a better place to live. They are two vulnerable adults whose lives have been pulled into public view, debated, analyzed, and monetized. So if they relocate, the real question isn't, did they get a nicer house? It's this. Who controls the conditions of their new life? Let's finish the chain reaction. When a move happens, attention spikes. Curiosity grows. Speculation multiplies. Narratives compete. That surge creates opportunity and risk. If privacy is protected immediately and consistently, the surge fades. If details leak, even small ones, the surge intensifies. And once location or access patterns become public, the entire purpose of relocation begins to unravel. Because a new address without boundaries is not protection. It's exposure with a fresh coat of paint. The next critical factor is authority. Relocation often changes paperwork. Who is the emergency contact? Who signs off on services? Who communicates with providers? Who approves financial decisions? If those answers are clear and documented, stability increases. If those answers are vague, informal, or assumed, authority gaps appear. And gaps attract opportunists. No single gatekeeper. That principle becomes non-negotiable. When one person controls access, updates, and resources, the risk doesn't disappear. It consolidates. Protection requires shared oversight, multiple points of contact, clear documentation, boundaries that don't shift depending on convenience. Then there is the financial layer. Relocation often sparks new fundraising attempts, legitimate or not, fake campaigns, impersonation accounts, insider donation links. In a high-attention environment, confusion spreads faster than correction. The only safeguard is verification, clear, limited channels, consistent messaging, no emotional urgency appeals, because urgency is the tool of exploitation. Next comes services. A move only improves safety if essential care becomes more reliable. Proximity to clinics, regular medication management, routine welfare checks, reliable food and utilities. If those systems are built in from day one, the relocation strengthens them. If the focus stays only on the house itself and not on the infrastructure around it, vulnerability simply shifts location. And then there's something quieter. Identity. When people live in the same place for decades, even in hardship, that place becomes their orientation point. Moving can feel destabilizing. New sounds, new routines, new people, Transition stress is real. That's why continuity planning matters. Who checks in during the first week? Who confirms prescriptions transfer correctly? Who ensures daily needs are stable before stepping back? The first 30 to 90 days determine whether relocation settles into safety or slides into confusion. And here is the final truth. A move doesn't save anyone. It creates a reset. What happens next depends entirely on structure. If privacy is respected, oversight is shared, services are stable, and no single voice controls the narrative, relocation can become protection. If attention spikes, control centralizes, and money narratives return, relocation becomes a new stage. That is the fork in the road. So when people ask, should they move? The better question is, should they move with safeguards? Because without safeguards, change is just motion. With safeguards, change becomes stability. What matters most going forward? Privacy? Oversight? Services? Shared authority? Comment one word and explain why. Because in 2026, the difference between protection and exploitation isn't the address. It's the system built around it. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.